Okay, so we get the caliper on. Now we can basically finish attaching the brake hose. You'll want to remember how the old brake hose went, or take a look at the other side. Because this brake hose is long, it can kind of weave in and out of here a couple different ways. You want to make sure it goes in exactly how it was before so that it doesn't interfere with anything else. Basically, it's pretty much self-explanatory, but it is easy to wrap a brake hose up around something if you're not paying attention. So basically, the new caliper has a little plug in it to prevent any debris from getting in there. Just yank that out. You will need to take the bolt from the old caliper. This bolt is called a banjo bolt, and what it does is it's hollow in the center. It has a hole in it, and this bolt allows the brake fluid to flow through the brake line and through this banjo bolt, as it's called, and into the brake caliper. It actually uses this bolt as part of a tube to distribute the brake fluid to the caliper properly. It also takes these gold washers. These basically are meant to be somewhat crushed when they're installed. You snug them down and torque them to the proper torque, and it'll actually crush these, and it'll fill in any space, and it's kind of like a molded washer. It molds to the caliper and the bolt and prevents it from leaking. And as you attach this, you can basically screw it in by hand to start it, and then you'll want to snug it down with a wrench. So basically all we're going to do is reverse the removal steps. Very simple. We're going to go ahead and put our little clip back in place on the brake hose. Just line it up by hand first, and you can tap it in. You don't really necessarily need a hammer. You're not going to be beating it. You're just going to be tapping it. Channel locks works fine. Couple taps. You can use a screwdriver to take up some of the space there. Once it's in place, you're good to go. Now you want to finish tightening this brake line. I just started it. Now we're going to tighten it. So to tighten it, again, you're going to want to have both wrenches, 12 millimeter for the steel brake line, 16 for the rubber hose. And you can snug the line down first. When you feel the other the brake hose start to turn, then you want to put the other wrench on it to stop it. Remember, righty tighty, lefty loosey. You'll know when you're getting close to tight because the old rusty part of the bolt is the only thing showing. The nice clean part that's inside starts to disappear. And you'll feel it starting to get a little tighter. That's when you put this bigger wrench on to hold it. And these are pretty much brass. They don't need to be super tight. Once you get them nice and snug, it's usually good enough. We'll check it later, make sure there's no leak. Last thing we're going to do is attach the line to the frame here. Control arm, which is just that little tab, goes into the control arm, locks it in place, put the bolt in. We're using these new wrenches from Gear Wrench. They are absolutely wonderful. I love them to death. They're a great invention. It's basically the standard gear wrench, which is an open-end wrench on one side and a gear wrench on the other, or a ratchet wrench on the other. They've also twisted it. So if I have to give this leverage, to tighten it, let's say I'm loosening it, I can take the bottom square part of my hand and tap that to loosen it up, and it just helps your hand so much. And same thing when you're tightening, you have a lot more leverage with the full face of that wrench as you would in the old days when you were using just the side of it. It hurts your hands. These are wonderful. We do sell these, so if you're interested in these, we definitely have these. Just give us a call or check the website, and they're gear wrench, and they're just the new twisted style. Okay, so we've got it all completed now. We're basically got to just bleed the brakes as the last step. There's several ways to bleed brakes, and many mechanics have their own way, and the way I like to do it, I don't pump the brakes anymore. I don't use a vacuum bleeder. Gravity bleeding, I found, is the absolute best way. You prevent a lot of chances of having a problem with the analog brakes. You also have a chance when you're pumping the brake pedal to put a lot of stress on the master cylinder. So to gravity bleed, all you do is pop the bleeder loose, just so it's loose. And there may not be any fluid coming out yet, because remember, this fluid's going to come down the brake line, it's going to start filling the caliper up, and it's going to displace the air. As the air comes out of the bleeder, the brake fluid will fill in that space, and it'll start dripping out once it takes all the air out. So it's basically gravity pushing that air out and filling it up with brake fluid. Also, another very, very important thing is to make sure the cap is off of the master cylinder if you're going to brake gravity bleed. If the cap is off of the master cylinder, it allows atmospheric pressure to push down on that brake fluid, and that's what actually allows this to happen. You're also going to want to make sure you keep the brake fluid full in the master cylinder, which that's what we'll do now. We'll make sure it's got enough fluid to drain through here. Basically, when you have a nice stream of clean brake fluid coming out, the caliper is basically bled. So you'll want to watch it. You may see a few air bubbles pop out of there. Wait till you just see a nice solid stream of clean brake fluid. Then you can snug the bleeder screw down, and you can pretty much go test drive it. You'll want to pump the brake pedal before driving. Pumping the brake pedal before driving with the bleeders closed. This will seat the brake pads against the rotor. You could actually get in the car, start it, push the brake pedal down, have no pedal, because you haven't seated the brake pads to the rotor. It has to take up that slack. So that's what we're going to do now. We'll snug this bleeder valve down. These are not Superman tight, they're just snugged. And we're going to put the wheels on and take it for a test drive. So basically that's all there is to it. We've got the calipers on, the hoses on, we've bled it, we've topped off the brake fluid. We've tightened the lug nuts up. One thing to remember, especially on aluminum wheels, is you should always use a torque wrench. That's what we used. Also, once you drive the vehicle for a little bit, you want to come back and re-torque them. These wheels, since they're aluminum, they actually crush a little bit, and you can actually have a loose lug nut. So to prevent the wheel from possibly coming off, always recheck the torque. Another thing, be very careful with brake fluid. It's terrible for paint. It's great if you need a paint remover, but if you drip brake fluid on your paint, it'll lift the paint right up off of it, and it's very easy to ruin the paint. So just be very careful when you're working with the brake fluid above the hood. Keep a rag next to you and don't drip it anywhere. Otherwise, please visit our website, autopartsdirect2.com, for all the auto parts you need, and please visit our auto instructional website, which is automex.com. We have hundreds of videos on there, do-it-yourself videos. So thank you very much.